Imagine the most powerful man alive, standing on the roof of the greatest city ever built, looking out across golden towers, endless rivers, and millions of subjects bowing in his honor. And then, in the very next moment, that same man is crawling on all fours in an open field, soaked in morning dew, his hair wild and matted like a bird's nest, his fingernails curled like the claws of an eagle, eating grass from the ground like an animal. No palace, no crown, no throne, just a former king, stripped of everything, humbled in the most extraordinary and bizarre way history has ever recorded. This is not a legend. This is one of the most documented and debated stories of the ancient world, and it begins not with weakness, but with an almost unimaginable level of power. Nebuchadnezzar II was born around 634 BC in the region of Chaldea in southeastern Babylonia. His father, Nabopolassar, had spent years fighting off the suffocating grip of the Assyrian Empire and had finally succeeded in establishing the Neo-Babylonian Empire as the new force of the ancient Near East. Nebuchadnezzar grew up watching his father wage wars, forge alliances, and reshape the map of the known world. From his earliest years, he was being prepared not just to inherit a kingdom, but to expand it beyond anything his father had ever imagined. He received a military education, studied government administration, and trained under some of the most seasoned commanders of his era. By the time he was a young man, he was already leading armies. In 605 BC, while still crown prince, Nebuchadnezzar led Babylonian forces against Pharaoh Necho II of Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish, and crushed him. It was a decisive, world-shifting victory that announced to every nation watching that Babylon had arrived. Shortly after that battle, his father died, and Nebuchadnezzar raced home to claim the throne. He was not yet 40 years old, and he had already defeated one of the most powerful rulers on earth. His reign, which would last 43 years, had only just begun. Historians today regard him as the longest reigning and most accomplished king of the Babylonian dynasty. Once he was firmly on the throne, Nebuchadnezzar turned his attention to conquering and consolidating. He marched against rebellious kingdoms in the Levant, subdued nations that had grown bold during his father's final years, and set his sights on Jerusalem. In 597 BC, he laid siege to the city and captured it, deporting its elite citizens to Babylon in what would become known as the Babylonian captivity. When Jerusalem rose against him again, he returned in 587 BC and this time destroyed the city entirely, bringing down the great Temple of Solomon and scattering the Jewish population. His name would become seared into history as both a conqueror and an instrument of divine judgment, with Hebrew prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel writing about him in terms that still echo across centuries. But Nebuchadnezzar was far more than a military commander. He was a builder on a scale almost incomprehensible for his time. He rebuilt Babylon from the ground up, constructing fortification walls so massive they were said to be wide enough for chariots to race across the top. He renovated temples, built grand processional avenues, and erected the famous Ishtar Gate, a towering entrance covered in glazed blue bricks and decorated with golden dragons and bulls, which archaeologists later unearthed and reassembled in a Berlin museum where it still stands today. He also built the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, reportedly for his wife Amytis, a Median princess who missed the green hills of her homeland. Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar became the greatest city on earth, and the king knew it. That pride, that swelling sense of personal greatness, would become the very thing that undid him. The Book of Daniel records a moment that stands as one of the most dramatic in all of ancient literature. The king had a dream, a towering tree that sheltered the whole world, beautiful and strong, suddenly cut down by a divine decree. A young Jewish prophet named Daniel, one of the exiles brought from Jerusalem and trained in Babylon's royal court, was the only one who could interpret it. Daniel's message was both respectful and devastating. The tree was Nebuchadnezzar himself, and the cutting down was a judgment that was coming. Unless the king changed his ways and acknowledged that all his power came from something greater than himself, he would be driven from men, lose his human mind, and live among animals. For 12 months, nothing happened. Then one day Nebuchadnezzar stood on the roof of his royal palace, looked out over the magnificent skyline he had raised, and spoke words that sealed his fate. The ancient text records him saying that the great Babylon he saw before him was the city he had built by his own mighty power, and for the honor of his own greatness. And while those words were still leaving his lips, a voice came from the sky, and the sentence fell upon him instantly. Nebuchadnezzar was driven away from human society. He ate grass like an ox. His body was drenched nightly in the dew of the fields. His hair grew long and tangled like the feathers of an eagle, and his nails became thick and curved like the claws of a bird. And he was now living with animals. Then something incredible happened. After 7 long years of living like a wild animal, wandering in the open fields, soaked in rain and dew, eating grass and having no memory of who he once was, something shifted inside the king. One day, Nebuchadnezzar slowly lifted his eyes and looked up toward the sky. That single moment changed everything. The moment he looked up, his mind came back to him. It was as if a light had been switched on inside a room that had been dark for years. He could think clearly again. He recognized where he was. He remembered who he was. And for the first time in his life, the great king understood something that all his victories and all his buildings and all his gold had never taught him, that there is a power in the universe far greater than any king who has ever lived, and that true strength begins the moment a person learns to be humble. As soon as his mind returned, the people around him, his advisors and officials who had been watching over the kingdom in his absence, brought him back into the palace. His honor was restored. His throne was given back to him. His kingdom was returned exactly as it had been before, and he became king of Babylon once again. He even became greater than he was before, because now he ruled not just with power, but with the kind of wisdom that only comes from going through something incredibly hard. He spent the rest of his life ruling Babylon and eventually passed away around 562 BC. But the most powerful thing he left behind was not a wall or a garden or a golden gate. It was the story of a man who had everything, lost it all, and came back changed. Proof that no matter how far a person falls, it is never too late to look up.
If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge your faith and perspective.